We've all found ourselves driving slowly through an unfamiliar neighborhood when a particularly threatening sign catches our eye. Warning: all suspicious persons and activities are immediately reported to our police department. Neighborhood watch program enforced. No noir-era detectives or sneaky pelicans allowed. This sign, depending on which side of the law you find yourself, likely makes you feel either more protected or more victimized. But who exactly is the Neighborhood Watch? And where did this nationwide organization start? Let's find out. To answer our question, we'll need to go back to the 60s. No, not that one. That's more like it. Since the Great Depression, through the Second World War, and into the Cold War, America had become a powerful force with tremendous economic growth, nearly full employment, and, considering the Civil Rights Movement and Act, historic racial progress. It's an era sometimes referenced today as America's greatest time period. So it's not difficult to understand why no one was expecting a dramatic upswing in violent crime. The homicide rate rose over 200% from 1957 to 1980. And it wasn't just killings. Rape, assault, robbery, and theft experienced an increase as well. Cities such as New York were considered especially dangerous. By the end of the 60s, the rise in violence had reshaped American culture, as evident by Richard Nixon's Law and Order platform.
I am for law and order.
And comedians' constant references to getting mugged in Central Park.
Like a talk show host would be like, I was in Central Park. Everybody like, oh, ho, ho, like that was a joke that you got mugged just from going to Central Park. Not at night, like any time, Central Park, you know.
There's no one solid explanation for this rise in violent crime. In the States, one could blame the conflict that would naturally follow a widespread integration in society. The passing of several major policies alone communicates just how significant of a change the country was going through. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Civil Rights Act of 1968, just to name a few. This was a major, necessary, long overdue, and well-deserved time of progress for African Americans in the U.S. So, of course, some people were butthurt.
I don't hate niggers, man. I don't associate with niggers. On the other hand, I don't associate with common white trash or Jews or Catholics, if I can help it.
Hate crime skyrocketed. In one case from Mississippi, June 1964, men aiding African Americans with voting, education, and employment were arrested for speeding after visiting a church that had been burned. The men disappeared that night. The FBI soon picked up the case, and the bodies were located over a month later, the two white men shot and the black man severely beaten. In addition, 1966 saw the birth of the Black Panther Party, which advocated for arming citizens in order to hold the Oakland Police Department accountable. The group had several firefights with the police in the late 60s, many ending with dead cops or party members. Growing anxiety led to the Mulford Act in 1967, signed by California Governor Ronald Reagan.
Of this city, America missed me.
It stripped legal gun ownership from Black Panthers and forbade everyone, black or white, from carrying loaded firearms in public. Needless to say, racial tensions were at an all-time high. But hate crime doesn't account for the similar rises in violent crime in other countries at the time, such as England, the Netherlands, Italy, and Germany. So what else could it be? Another possible factor is all the boomers are coming of age. That's right, people like Sylvester Stallone, Samuel L. Jackson, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and your delightfully racist grandma are taking the reins of society, fighting as brave young men in Vietnam, coming back totally well-adjusted. Building bombs together to kill people in order to protest killing people, sailing through a prosperous economy and sending you pointed, lazy millennial memes on Facebook.
From the people who brought you Richard Nixon.
In addition to the rising population of young people, America was seeing an incredible culture shift. Marriage was no longer the default step for young adults. And with more men, plenty ex-military, out on the town with no wife to keep curfew or kids to tend to, perhaps it led to some reindeer games. Throw in having to not be racist, and you might as well just give up. Another major shift in society at this time was drug culture. Marijuana became more mainstream, but only 4% of American adults in 1967 reported having tried it. Also rising in popularity was LSD, supported by Harvard psychology researcher Timothy Leary in order to turn on, tune in, and drop out, with the potential to expand the mind and recognize personal truth. Yeah, America was never gonna let that one fly. LSD was made illegal, and Leary was fired, called the most dangerous man in America by Richard Nixon, and repeatedly imprisoned throughout his life. So drugs are rampant and out to kill your kids. People are racist and out to kill each other. And if you still have faith in humanity, don't worry. Here comes the murder of Kitty Genovese. In 1964, Catherine Susan Kitty Genovese was a bar manager and aspiring restaurant owner in Queens who was followed home after a late shift by a man who later stabbed, raped, and murdered her on the first floor of her apartment building. But what gave this case nationwide attention was the lack of intervention from over 30 witnesses, despite the killer at one point even leaving Kitty still alive at the scene before returning 10 minutes later. The murder of Kitty Genovese not only validated the fear of violent crime felt by many Americans, but also instilled a great sense of helplessness. If your neighbors hearing your tortured screams won't save you, what will? We will, said your neighbors. After Genovese's death, law enforcement urged residents to get directly involved in reporting crime to local authorities. Meanwhile, Americans got to know their neighbors to make sure they were good Christian folk and not commies.
Be alert to spot anyone promoting the communist line. They are dangerous.
Members of some communities even began meeting together to watch the neighborhood. You see where this is going. In 1972, the National Sheriff's Association created the National Neighborhood Watch, a unified force of volunteer residents working closely with their local law enforcement toward the common goal of fighting crime. To this day, citizens act as an extra set of eyes and ears for local authorities and as an official liaison between residents and their police. Now, this isn't the first time America has seen organized volunteer security forces. During colonial America, town constables organized and managed watches to stand guard, especially at night, against suspicious individuals and, more importantly, fire. Back in those days, a fire could destroy an entire village. It was a good time to be a fire. Eventually, the town watch became a paid position, albeit not much. These town watches also differed from today's neighborhood watches in that colonial local law enforcement often supplied training, uniforms, equipment, and even weapons to patrolmen. Compare that to today, and things look very different. Despite communicating closely with law enforcement, neighborhood watch volunteers do not possess any more authority than you or me, meaning they can't make arrests. In fact, stopping and questioning someone against their will or holding them in custody for even a moment could lead to false arrest or false imprisonment charges. Instead, volunteers should notify local authorities about suspicious activity immediately, without intervention. While every community's watch group will vary, the National Neighborhood Watch employs two main approaches for preventing crime: reducing opportunity and addressing social problems. The first approach uses observation to spot and eliminate potential opportunities for criminal activity, while the second approach targets the root causes of crime through education and social activities. So, is the National Neighborhood Watch actually successful in reducing crime? The answer isn't really clear. While crime has decreased over the decades, it's difficult to quantify the Neighborhood Watch's role. Some studies believe the program to be effective, while others disagree, mostly discrediting the methods of research from prior studies suggesting so. Anecdotal evidence from law enforcement officers on Reddit leads me to believe neighborhood watchers are more annoying than they are effective. But crime has reportedly decreased after the introduction of neighborhood watch programs in many areas. So perhaps the signs do deter criminals. Or maybe the would-be offenders are in school or at work with the help of the local neighborhood watch. One thing's for sure, it definitely can't go wrong. Until it did. In 2012, Neighborhood Watch Coordinator George Zimmerman fatally shot Trayvon Martin, an unarmed teenager walking back from a convenience store in Sanford, Florida. But even prior to shots firing, Zimmerman went against multiple National Neighborhood Watch guidelines. Don't intervene, definitely don't exit your vehicle in doing so, and don't patrol with a weapon. Now, Zimmerman was found not guilty for both second-degree murder and manslaughter. But that didn't stop accusations of racism towards him. Regardless of intentions, Trayvon Martin may still be alive if it weren't for Zimmerman's disregard for the Neighborhood Watch guidelines. So next time you're riding with a friend and you see a Neighborhood Watch sign, you can tell them just how unorganized and powerless those guys really are. And they can say, huh.
Hey guys, thank you for watching my first video in this series. I know I spent a lot of time on setting up the political and social climate, but I just think context is pretty important when talking about things like this. So if you enjoyed this content and you'd like to see more questions you never knew you had answered, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends because I currently have no subscribers as the time of uploading this video. Bye!